right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And here he is, Jacob Prash on the East Coast. How are you, Jacob?
I'm doing well in Jesus. Wonderful to be with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us. And David Lister, not too far from Jacob on the East Coast as well. David, how are you?
Doing good today. A beautiful spring day.
You got a nice reclining chair there. There we go. That's good. Better than
Yeah.
better than most. Davey, down in Australia, how are you this morning?
Yeah, doing pretty good, thanks, and good to be with you guys again.
Praise the Lord. And I do want to mention that Jay, dear brother, is not here right now. We need to pray for his father. His father was in an accident earlier today. He is going to the hospital. As far as we know, he is okay, just going to the hospital. So please keep him in prayer.
Yes.
And please keep John in prayer. We want to pray for him, and we want to pray for James as well, that the Lord will give him peace. So please keep them in prayer. As soon as we have more updates, we will let you know. As far as we are here, it's Davey's in the control today, and the rest of the panel. We will remember James, and we'll remember, of course, his father, and you do as well. So thank you for being with us, catching up with Jacob. And while we pray for his father and we think of his father, we want to remind you that we are on different platforms today, and specifically YouTube and Rumble. Apparently, all the other platforms are having trouble today, and there's some bandwidth issues. So please bear with us as we deal with the bandwidth issues that they have and the problems that they have technically, that we get those things up and running. But as far as we know, we can get you on Rumble. You can get us on Rumble. You can get us on YouTube. And then on Backstage, we'll be on Rumble as well. You can ask questions, and Jacob will take questions at the end. So please join us for that. Jacob Prash, please, any announcements, anything that you would like to mention? I know you are in the East Coast and you're coming to the West Coast.
Well, if you visit the Moriel website itinerary page, we will be in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday. The details are on the website. We're in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, very close to Pittsburgh. On the 15th of the month, the 11th of May, I'm due to be with Pastor Marco Quintana in Devore, California, San Bernardino, in the eastern suburbs of Los Angeles. Looking forward to seeing you then. If you are in the LA area or the Inland Empire, please come and see us. If you don't have a church on Sunday morning, we'd love to meet you.
Amen. Thank you, Jacob. And please pray for Jacob. He's about to embark on a very long journey, not only East Coast, West Coast of the United States, but then, Jacob, you're going to Asia, you're going to Australia, you're going to New Zealand, and then you'll be back here at some point and back to the UK
Right.
after that. So much prayer for you. Much prayer for you.
So
David Lister, you got any announcements that we haven't covered yet?
Well, Jacob's on Zoom tomorrow. Make sure you can tune in from anywhere. It'll be 11 a.m. Eastern time on Zoom. So from here in Greensburg, he's going to do the having confidence in serving the Lord in these end times.
Amen. Amen. So that will be tomorrow in Pittsburgh, or this weekend in Pittsburgh, and here on the West Coast the week after that. Just in time for Mother's Day, Jacob. So just in time for Mother's Day here in the States. I know it's a little bit different in the UK. Different date. Davey, I wanted to go to you real quick to remind everybody to pray for the Australian election. Can you remind us when is the Australian election, and we need to pray for that?
Yeah, the election is actually next Saturday, May the 3rd, I believe it is, if I've got my dates right. But early voting has already started. So, yeah, look, we do need to pray for God's will to be done. And please take your responsibility to vote seriously here. At the moment, it would seem that, and I don't know how they're even knowing this, but they're saying that Albo's already ahead at the moment.
Oh man.
It'll be interesting to see what happened. Albo kind of offended a lot of people yesterday by there was some booing at the Anzac Day ceremonies yesterday by people who were kind of fed up with the welcome to country. Albo's done a speech basically saying we're going to go after you, painting each and everyone who booed as basically a white Nazi supremacist and all the rest of it, which isn't going to go down too well. But yeah, look, please pray for a good outcome here with the election and also with Canada's, which is this weekend.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, we got Canada on the hopper for prayer next, but we'll be talking about it here. So thank you, Davey. Appreciate it. And we want to make sure that we pray that wicked leaders are removed and God replaces them with good leaders. Although our
Amen.
nations are not in good condition at the moment, so we are getting the leaders we deserve um, as a whole. As a whole. So we'll pray for that. Jacob Prash, this is all the announcements we have. We want to start off with remembering 80 years ago today at the Albi River in Germany.
Yes.
The United States Army and the Russian Army met there, and it was technically the conclusion of the Second World War. Any thoughts on you look back 80 years and how far we've come?
Well, the post-war history was defined on what happened at this time in history. Once the Battle of Kursk happened in what is today the Ukraine, and the Battle of the Bulge happened in the Ardennes on the border of Germany, where Germany, Luxembourg, and Belgium come together. It became impossible for the Nazis to do anything but lose. There was a turnaround with the Normandy invasions in the West. There was a turnaround with the Battle of Stalingrad in the East. But after Kursk happened in the East, and after the Battle of the Bulge, it was only a matter of time. The Allies from the West were going to cross the Rhine. The Russians, the Soviets, were going to cross the Alda River from Poland in the East, and they were going to meet. It was impossible. At this particular time in history, the focus went from the defeat of Hitler and even Japan. Japan was still a lingering issue, but not Hitler. They knew he was finished. And they knew he was not thinking rationally after the assassination attempt on him. Had he thought rationally, he would have attempted to make a retreat into the Alps and regrouped into the Alps, where he had his eagle's nest, his secret hiding place, whatever, semi-secret, and he would have tried to fight an entrenched resistance from southern Germany. But he didn't do that. He was determined to stay in Berlin irrationally. But once these two armies met, it was impossible for him to do that. He was never going to get down to the Alps. Now Germany was cut in half, and it was only a matter of time before the Reich collapsed. At this time, things began to change. The thinking began to change in Washington, in Moscow, and in London. The thinking began to change. It was at this time the rudiments of the Cold War began to take shape. Churchill always knew that Stalin was no good. He was no better than Hitler. The United States was scared into certain realities, and the realities took place. What Hitler did with Stalin, making an agreement to divide Poland and to divide countries in Eastern Europe, what happened at Yalta was the Americans making a deal with Stalin, dividing the countries of Europe. The Roosevelt administration, followed by Truman, and worse by Truman, sold Eastern Europe down the river to the communists. They just betrayed Eastern Europe to the communists. They divided Europe. The Americans easily had the means to push Stalin back into Russia. Americans had nuclear weapons at this point. The Russians did not yet have them. Churchill wanted to do this. General Patton wanted to do this. Others wanted to do this. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. And we had the Cold War, thanks to Roosevelt, and particularly thanks to Truman and their ilk. There was a betrayal. So by the time this happened 80 years ago today, they were no longer thinking about the defeat of Hitler. They were thinking about the partition and the division of Europe and the Cold War that was going to take place. That is what happened. And with that came the nuclear arms race. With that came the space race. With that came eventually the Cuban Missile Crisis. And this went on and on and on into the 1990s. all unnecessary, all could have been prevented. Much the same as Hitler could have been stopped in Munich, but wasn't, so Stalin could have been stopped at Berlin, but wasn't. Just a betrayal of the West by the White House, by the Democratic Party. That that is basically what happened. Uh, and anybody who really knew it, but the general public didn't know. All they could think about was VE and victory over Europe. They didn't see what was coming on the heels of it. A Cold War that would potentially eliminate the human race from existence. And for this, we can again thank the Democratic Party. Not that I'm a Republican, I'm not. And we can thank the legacy of Truman, and we can thank certainly Roosevelt, but particularly Truman. Truman allowed even Yalta to be violated. They had the Potsdam Treaty, and there was just a general sellout. What also interestingly happened, the Soviets took 80,000 casualties and high fatalities taking Berlin. Germany was going to fight down to the last German. That was Hitler's determination in his bunker. And Eisenhower just said, well, let's let them do it. We'll make a deal that we will divide Berlin, and as in Check Post Charlie, etc. And then the Berlin Wall would later come. But let the Russians take it. Why should Americans and British die taking Berlin? Let the Russians die taking Berlin. They're going to have to share it with us anyway. This is what was really going on at this particular time. Once the Battle of the Bulge failed in the West, and once Kursk happened in the East, there was no turning back. It was only a matter of time. But Hitler, who was demon-possessed, he was obviously psychotic. He was involved in the occult. He was involved in taking all kinds of tranquilizers and drugs. He was not thinking rationally, and nobody would stand up to him and stop him. Nobody would stand up to him and stop him. That is what happened. What happened to Germany didn't have to happen. What happened to Europe didn't have to happen. None of these things had to happen, but they did. As a result of all of this, there was, however, with the liberation of the Nazi extermination camps, the concentration camps, enough international sentiment to create the state of Israel and vote for partition. Roosevelt was no friend of the Jewish people. He refused to increase immigration levels of Jewish refugees from Europe. Roosevelt was perfectly happy to let Jews die in concentration camps. He had no problem with that. Truman, and I can't think of any figure in the 20th century of whom I would have a less opinion in the United States, at least, than Harry Truman. Harry Truman did support the petition. The United States did vote for the petition, the reestablishment of Israel.
Right.
Now, although all these bad things happened, we have to see it was the hand of God.
Lord. Yeah.
But what a tragedy and what an irony that it took Joseph Stalin, who expelled the Jews from the party in Zinoviev and killed Trotsky, it killed the Jewish Bolsheviks. So it caused Russian Jews to want to begin a Zionist model, a Jewish model of socialism and collectivism in the kibbutz movements and the moshavs in Israel. It was Stalin, and then it was Hitler and the Third Reich and the Holocaust. What an indictment of rabbinic Judaism, of Talmudic Judaism, that God had to use Hitler and Stalin, two of the biggest murderers in all of human history, two vehement anti-Semites, two demonized madmen. If it was not for Hitler and Stalin, there would be no Israel today. Why didn't God use the rabbis? Why did the rabbis initially condemn Zionism, condemn Theodor Herzl? Why? Not until the Holocaust did Reform Judaism modify its position in favor of Zionism. They call their synagogues temples, meaning the promised land is Los Angeles and New York and Florida, not Israel. Not until the Holocaust did the rabbis get on board with Zionism. did the Lubavitch movement strongly get on board with Zionism. The Satmar Hasidim continue to oppose Zionism to this very day. It is an indictment of Talmudic Judaism, of rabbinism. It shows it is not biblical Judaism. God did not use the rabbis as the shepherds of the Jewish people. The rabbis did not support Zionism. God had to use socialists. And God even had to use megalomaniac murderers to bring about the existence of the rebirth of the nation Israel and fulfillment of the prophecies of both the Old and New Testament. Now, nobody's going to tell you that. You know, they're not going to say that. It wouldn't be politically correct. But I dare anybody to debate me publicly.
Yeah, it's incredible, Jacob, the hand of God, even in situations that were so horrific. And wasn't most of the pioneers that founded Israel, the Jewish pioneers, they weren't even believers in a sense of
They were socialists. They were
yeah,
communist socialists.
atheists. Yeah, yeah. Ben Gurion, I don't think he was a
No,
religious.
no. One of the reasons the Soviets hated Israel so much, one of the reasons they turned against Israel, was that in the early days of Zionism, the kibbutz movement and the Moshavs, they created a genuinely democratic and egalitarian model of socialism and communism or collectivism that worked. They
Yeah,
achieved what the Soviets failed to. Now, of course, the kibbutz movement has become sociologically and economically obsolete in many respects. They're not what they were, obviously, in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, although they still exist as kind of like collective companies or something. But they they had a form of collectivism, of socialism, of communism that actually was egalitarian and that actually worked, even though it became obsolete as the nation developed economically and became more affluent. It worked. And so the Soviets hated Zionism because the Zionists did what the Bolsheviks failed to.
couldn't do. Yeah, yeah. Incredible, isn't it? Incredible. And this has all happened in the 40s, and we look ahead 80 years later or so, and 70, well, it's 48, so 77 years since Israel became a nation. So it is the
One
history.
book I would tell people to read, and it's also a film called Cast a Giant Shadow.
Hmm.
The first chief of staff of the Israeli military, the Rosh HaMateh, the first chief of staff, was an American Jew who went to West Point. He had been on
Oh,
Patton's staff.
oh,
Patton told him to go help Israel.
oh,
Uh,
wow.
he helped Israel, as did General Ord Wingate, who went against the British establishment to help Israel. So there were British and American generals, you know, people who educated in West Point and in Sandhurst who did help Israel, and went against the political establishment to do so. Um, Most of the initial pilots of the Israeli Air Force, the IAF, were Jewish Americans and British Jews. In fact, Ezra Weizmann was defense minister of Israel, but he was the chief of the Israeli Air Force, and he had been in the RAF.
Wow.
President Chaim Cohen had been a colonel in the British forces. There were 30,000 British troops who fought in the Palestinian Legion under Montgomery
Hmm.
against the Nazis and against Rommel. 30,000 so-called Palestinian Legion, except
Yeah.
none of them were Arabs. Every one of them was a Jew.
No, it is true. If you look at these,
I'm not a fan of Voltaire, but he was right about certain things. And one of the things Voltaire was right about is that history is the lie everyone agrees on.
that's right. That's right. Jacob, from one issue to the other, I wanted to talk to you about, and we'll get David Lister on in a minute here. The procession was today of Pope Francis, died at 88 years old, April 21st. He passed away. Today was the procession. Tomorrow is the funeral. All the leaders and dignitaries are going to be there for a big shindig, I suppose. So the man who had the keys to heaven, so the Catholic Church says, for 12 years, passed away, brain hemorrhage, probably had a stroke, battled with pneumonia. Your thoughts on his legacy? No doubt he was probably the most extreme Marxist pope probably in a long time, if not ever. But wanted to get your thoughts on what happened. I know you got a video coming out, but just a brief thought on that.
Well, he said he had the keys. He found out that the book of Revelation, chapter 3, was right. He did not have the keys. It was the Lord Jesus who had the keys.
Amen.
They shouldn't be singing Requiem Aeternam at his funeral mass. They should be singing Little Richard. You hear me knocking, but you can't get in. That is the reality of this Pope who said, "Who am I to judge concerning homosexuality?" And who told Catholic priests to put a benediction on homosexual and lesbian marriages. It was doubly disgraceful that we had so-called pseudo-evangelical figures from the New Apostolic Reformation, or I should say pseudo-apostolic Reformation. We've had people like Russell Moore and Copeland and others saying that this Pope was a friend of evangelicism. Well, if you mean biblical evangelicism, no, he was the enemy of biblical evangelicism. He said fundamentalist Christianity must be obliterated, essentially. And he again told priests to put a benediction on same-sex marriage. He was no friend of biblical evangelicism. He was a friend of televangelism because, like them, the Roman Catholic Church has the same God, Mammon. They worship the same God, Mammon. So it is clear why people from the Word Faith Money camp would speak highly of him. They worship their co-religionists. They have the same God. This was a wicked, wicked man, putting a benediction on same-sex marriages, excommunicating members of the hierarchy who opposed his position on LGBTQ. What he did to the American bishop Strickland, not that I agree with Strickland theologically, but Strickland knew the moral bankruptcy of what this Pope represented. Excommunicating a cardinal who'd been the papal nuncio to the United States. You had McKendrick, the Cardinal of Washington, D.C., was proven to have been a lifelong pedophile, not just a serial pedophile, a lifelong pedophile. And when he was found out to be that and removed from the clergy, he was defrocked virtually. Pope Francis rehabilitated him and made him the Vatican's liaison with China, a serial, lifelong pedophile. People like Carlos Viago objected, he got excommunicated.
Yeah.
I think of Cardinal Pell, who spent the year in jail for pedophilia in Australia, but later exonerated due to insufficient evidence and let out of prison. He said that Pope Francis was a disaster for the Roman Catholic Church. It is not only evangelicals or Protestants or whoever who've warned about this figure. It was traditionalist Catholics warning about him and his policies and his placing a benediction on things that the Word of God designate to be, and unambiguously designate to be, flagrant immorality and unnatural perversion. And he put a blessing on it. He's an evil man. I ask people to watch this week's version of Word for the Weekend on RTN, which will also be available on Moriel. Also, Marco did a webcast this week, a kind of obituary on this Pope. What's it titled, Marco?
It's called Catholicism in Chaos.
Catholicism in Chaos. Please watch Catholicism in Chaos, and please watch this week's version of Word for the Weekend, where we were dealing with this Pope and his papacy and the ramifications of his death in greater depth.
Very good. Yeah, I can't wait. That's going to be awesome. David Lister, go to you real quick. 12 years of holding the keys. Now, he doesn't have them anymore. Jorge Mario Bergoglio from Argentina, the first Jesuit Pope, his legacy, your thoughts on him?
Well, he systematically, over his term, took apart the foundational doctrines of Christianity with statements. In Singapore, he said all religions are a path to God. And even though Bishop Joseph Strickland said, look, please declare clearly Jesus Christ is the only way, and to deny him is to deny him. And so to deny that is to deny him. And so he did that. He also told a young boy in 2018, he said, where is my atheist father now that he's dead? He said, God won't abandon him. So it sounds good, sounds compassionate, but it was a lie. And after that, he went on and he said that there is no hell. Sinful souls simply disappear. So he's annihilationist. He doesn't
Right.
even believe in hell.
I
But
guess
I'm
that's a
sure he's looking.
popular theology, isn't it, David, nowadays?
Yeah, very popular. And I bet you he's looking for them keys and wondering how long purgatory is going to last. So, and he said, so his soul will not disappear. Noah's dissolved. He will have to account for his crimes
Oh
he has
man.
committed. This was what people wrote about him, So he continued saying many other things that were totally bad. Like Jacob mentioned that he set a lot of bishops in place and a lot of cardinals in place, stacked with ideological clones of himself.
Pretty
So
much.
get this big t- conclave together, you're going to see that a lot of his people are already there and pretty much have the majority to pick the next pope that most likely will be even worse. And so, but he approved of blessing same-sex unions and actually supported abortion, believe it or not. He didn't
Indirect,
mind
yes.
that idols were were brought into the Vatican to honor it. These I believe it's called Pakayama.
Papa Macha. Yeah.
Yep. He brought him in 2019. Catholics across the world were horrified by this, and there was an Austrian Catholic named Alexander. I don't remember, can't pronounce his last name. He grabbed up the idols and threw them into the Tiber River. And the Pope Francis apologized not for the idolatry, but for the offended pagans. And
Mm.
so he also awarded the Papal Order of St. Gregory to a Dutch abortion advocate named Lily Plowman and awarded her. And she said, "Oh, this is confirms that her work, is of God and an abortion advocate." But this is what this man has done. He defrocked people that were pro-life because they stood up for pro-life, and he actually accused this one friar of being blasphemy for his pro-life post. So he was attacking life. Uh, so he had many strange beliefs and everything. And now he is paying the price for this. And I know that people say that he was a friend to evangelicals. He was not. He's taking apart the true faith of Jesus Christ and pushing it into the garbage bin and instilling some sort of horror of a religion.
Yeah, it's very similar to what the Bible describes in Revelation 17. Jacob, I want to go back to you. Pius XII was called Hitler's Pope. Uh,
Yes.
this guy Jorge Mario Bergoglio might as well call Lenin's Pope or the Mark
Yes.
or Arch's Pope.
Yes.
His stands had more to do with social justice and social causes rather than any biblical and theological causes, from climate change to LGBTQ issues to immigration, obviously interfaith dialogue, which would have been, similar to
Yes.
a theological issue. Any of those things that really provoked you to think that
First
this,
thing we have to notice this: the standard Roman Catholic knee-jerk response, muscle memory response to any criticism of the Pope or the papacy or the Roman Church at large, particularly the papacy, is the Protestants, or the evangelical. It's always that. So they tried to frame everything in terms of a Catholic Protestant or Catholic evangelical conflict or divide. When they cannot deny something, their next line of defense is to say the Protestants did it too.
yeah,
That justifies their action. So they always try to put it in that framework. But when you talk about Hitler's Pope or Marx's Pope, there's another factor that comes into play that creates a problem if you know how to argue the point. John Cornwall, who wrote the book Hitler's Pope, was a Roman Catholic author and is a Roman Catholic and a practicing Catholic author and researcher. It was a Catholic who accumulated this evidence concerning Pius XII. And obviously the rat lines. We think of Eichmann and Klaus Barbie and all these people. Remember, they were rescued by the Vatican. Bormann was rescued by the Vatican. In the aftermath of the Second World War, it was essentially Pius XII to rescue the Nazi war criminals and got them into Perón's Argentina.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church was closely associated with the Peronistas in Argentina, who were fascists, Juan Perón, and with Franco in Spain, as well as Mussolini in Italy. And then the Centrum, the Catholic Party of Bavaria, made the coalition that brought Hitler to power in Germany. It was the Vatican who rescued these Nazi war criminals under Pius XII. So just as it was John Cornwall, a Catholic author, who coined the phrase Hitler's Pope, let's understand something. It was Cardinal Pell from Australia. It was Cardinal Carlos Fajago, an Italian. It was Archbishop Strickland, Joseph Strickland from Texas, an American. It was the hierarchical figures of the Roman Catholic Church, including senior members of the Vatican Curia, who brought this indictment against the Jesuit Pope Francis. They can't say, oh, this is the Protestants or evangelicals attacking. No. We're quoting Catholic sources.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Jacob, his encyclicals, climate change encyclical, Laudato Si. Then you got the changes of marriage. This was not encyclical, but his document, The Joy of Love, which dealt with LGBTQ issues as well, calling tendencies, homosexual tendencies, not a sin. Immigration, which he wrote another paper on it, which basically castigated the United States, especially Trump and J.D. Vance, for his stance against immigration.
A month ago.
Yeah, and the last person to see him was J.D. Vance, so very ironic to see that. Your thoughts on his relationship with Israel, because the rabbis are coming out now singing his praises.
His pro-Palestinian positions were very biased against Israel.
Oh, absolutely.
October 7th.
Absolutely.
Very biased against Israel since October 7th. He was no friend of Israel. But again, either are the rabbis. So
Rabbi Abraham Skorka, who wrote a book, Heaven on Earth, called him he was just admiring his interfaith dialogue. So these rabbis were into interfaith dialogue, so they looked to Francis as some kind of hero in the interfaith dialogue, even though you're absolutely right. What he said about Jews on October 7th, he called them a genocide, needs to be investigated, cruelty from the Jewish people. So it is incredible, his relationship.
It's even worse than that. There had been 8 Roman Catholic churches in Gaza, 8. One is left. The other 7 were burned down by Hamas. The man was a complete and utter hypocrite. A complete and utter hypocrite. That's all he ever has been. Concerning the rabbis, you have to understand, because of the growth in Jews coming to faith in Jesus as the Messiah, that is international. You see it the most in the United States, and you see it in Israel, but you certainly see it also in other countries, Russia, including Russia. Anywhere there are Jews coming to faith in Jesus. But it's
Amen.
particularly North America and now in Israel. The rabbis like to push interfaith dialogue because they see it as a way to marginalize Christians who believe in evangelism of the Jews. It is a way to sequester or to marginalize Jewish evangelism. This attempts to proselytize our people is something that is hurting the very constructive and meaningful dialogue we're having with our Catholic friends. This is what they say. It is a theocratic political strategy that's being played for that reason, to discourage Jewish evangelism. And of course, the Catholic Church is perfectly fine with that.
It fits hand in glove with what they say and what they do. Being a Catholic myself at one point, it was unfairly taught a soft version of anti-Semitism within the lower class of people, but a higher form of anti-Semitism and replacementism and amillennialism
Yes,
within the higher theological
yes.
courses there. So they make no doubt about it. They're very anti-Jew, which kind of brings up the point, Jacob. The Israel was very quiet. I mean, talk about the political side and the secular side, very quiet about his death. They didn't want to say anything. For 4 days, they said nothing. They actually had a post on X and they removed it very quickly because they didn't want to seem too overly supportive of somebody who has been so critical of Israel. But recently, Netanyahu came out and eulogized Pope Francis. I guess after 4 days, it was enough without a comment.
Yeah, but it's all political. It is
Yeah,
all political posturing,
right, exactly.
state political posturing and hypocrisy.
Uh,
All politicians, the government's doing it. I'm not singling out Mr. Netanyahu.
that's right.
Mr. Mr. Vance did it. Mr. Trump did it. It's all political posturing, public relations. It is all hypocrisy.
Yeah. No doubt. I was just making the point that Israel was very hesitant or even acknowledging the fact that
Yes.
he was good to Israel when they actually at the end had it like you said, it is political at the end they had to admit it. David, listen, I'm going to go to you real quick. The Remembering the Victims of the Holocaust 2025. It was actually yesterday, April 24th, and President Trump says never again means now. You see the president of the United States taking a strong stance against anti-Semitism, remembering the Holocaust and remember the victims of the Holocaust. Yet we see in the world, especially in America, we'll start there, a surge, especially among young people within universities, to go against this. On the very day of Remembrance Day, you have protests against Jews, you have protests against Israel, even though the president was very, very clear. Your thoughts on where the trajectory is in the United States on anti-Semitism, which seems to be fueled by the left, of course, even among left
Yes.
Jews. Remember that? And but the administration, at least the current administration, is very pro Jews and protecting the rights of Jews, especially American Jews in our country.
Well, our president is absolutely on the right side of history here, and the rest of the world really has gone into a spiritual deception and supporting that which is evil. I mean, they're supporting Hamas terrorists who, if they're still fighting in Gaza, they lay down their arms, there will be peace. It's pretty simple, but they want to hold in the power and fight to the death almost. But
Yes.
um, it, the world is against them. We now see that England, Germany, France want to take on Israel, stand against them and create a two-state. I think the two-state solution was buried on October 7th. They had a state. Gaza was their land. The Jews, there wasn't a Jew there. They even took the dead bodies of the Jews out of Gaza so
Hmm.
they could have it. Anything, and then what happened? They left them factories to help them create industry and food, and they destroyed it. So these people hate, and now we're seeing riots in Brooklyn. We're seeing riots on our almost on our campuses everywhere. The rise in anti-Semitism is the worst I've ever seen in my life. We've seen in France. They're leaving, and now they have whole areas in Israel that speak French. It's
Yes.
crazy what has happened, and I don't know when it's going to turn around. I've written two papers on Moriel on rising Semitism. I think they're over 10 years old,
Hmm.
and I saw it back then, but it has not stopped in any way. I'm thankful for Mr. Trump that he's standing with him. I'm thankful that he's got Mr. Huckabee as the ambassador there. I hope that with all the turmoil in the world and the tariff things, that he might be able to bring pressure on some of these nations to withdraw their objections and maybe get some of these people to at least a peace treaty or some sort of peace understanding, to uh, so that Israel might have a respite. And so that would be the best hope that I can see. I don't know what else they could do because I think we're heading towards a time of even more trouble.
Hmm.
But, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, David. Jacob, on the day in which Trump rebukes the left, especially the anti-American colleges and universities, quote unquote, the president of Harvard says, yeah, Alan Garber, we may have an anti-Semitic problem, but it is our problem. We'll handle it. We don't need the federal government to step in, but give us the $2.5 billion. Can you explain what Harvard is? It's literally committing suicide.
First of all, obviously, if Harvard was going to deal with this anti-Semitic problem, it would have dealt with it already. Uh, you can't trust anything he's saying. He's just a political animal, and he's out for the money. Um, he shouldn't get a penny. I support what the Trump administration is doing completely, but I would not only apply that to Harvard. I'd apply it to Columbia. I would apply it to Yale. I'd apply it to Princeton. I'd apply it to certain other institutions as well. Um, so he's just playing a game. Yeah, we'll take care of it. It's our problem. No, you would have taken care of it already, but you didn't. You had no intentions of taking care of it. It is only pressure because of the Jewish alumnus and pressure because of the threats of Mr. Trump that you're even acting on it at all. That terrible woman, that plagiarist, who was a pseudo academic charlatan who had her job because of DEI. She was appointed. What was her name? That woman. She
Oh,
was
Claudine Gay.
Yeah, she was the president of Harvard only because of her gender and her race, not her qualification. She was a proven plagiarist, a proven She was a fraud, an academic fraud, and she plagiarized another black woman, a real academic, a genuine uh, African American academic. Um, she wouldn't in Congress. She wouldn't do anything. Wouldn't admit to anything. And it's still happening, and it will continue to happen unless they're forced to stop. They're not going to do anything unless it's under duress or pressure.
Hmm. Jacob Alan Garber, he's a Jew. He's a Jew, and he wouldn't even lift a finger to protect his own Jewish students in Harvard. I mean, you couldn't get any more hypocritical. Can you imagine a German not wanting to protect another German? But I guess
We
it
talked
happens.
about the Menlaus syndrome many times. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Blumenthal, Schumer. We've talked about Steve Cohen. We've talked about them, Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler being in the same party with Olmert and
Yeah.
with Diab and with the Squad and with anti-Jewish members of the House of Representatives. We've talked about them many times. You've got Jewish lawyers defending pro-Hamas
Yeah.
demonstrators. Um,
I guess we
there,
add Alan Gerber to that list.
yeah. Well, Alan Dershowitz is taking a more conservative, reasonable
Yeah.
position.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Alan
yeah,
Gerber, yeah, this guy here,
yeah.
for sure. David Lister, $53 billion endowment in Harvard, 53 billion with a B. They have a $5 billion interest that they gain every. I mean, they must have really good investors in there. 10%. They make about 10% every year. So $5 billion coming in. They're arguing about 2.5 billion that they want from the federal government, but they don't want any intervention. They want to remain. This is an independent. This is a private industry, or I guess it is an industry, a private institution. We don't want the government to tell us what to do. Just give us our money and leave us alone. But they won't lift a finger to finish or to prevent any of the problems that they've had and continue to foment the anti-Semitism, which the federal government is trying to stamp out, especially in universities that do take federal money.
Yeah, this is basically, as one man said, a mutual fund that runs a school.
That's right.
No.
Correct. Correct.
So and 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 what's better than the money you have? A little bit more money. So people think that's what they want. They want more money. And so they're going to go after this money, but they're doing it in a way they're trying to appease both sides. They they're out there saying, "Hey, we want our freedom to do this and everything." But at the other side, they've hired lawyers that have been friends of Trump and friends of the Trump family. So they're trying to find a way through this where they can have their cake and eat it too. They want the money. So it's evil what they're doing. The DEI, they want to have all this stuff that Trump is against. And I hope he stands firm. And like I agree with Jacob, pull all the money. Let's start trade schools and things like this for young people because the new millionaires coming up are people that start their own business that are plumbers, carpenters, electricians. They're making great money and they skip college, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's been known that at least some people have said college is a scam in terms of getting degrees of such that are worthless.
Unless you're getting a good STEM degree that's in demand.
Right.
A college degree in most fields is a waste of time for most people. It's a
Right.
waste of time and a waste of money in terms of marketability in the job market.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Lesbian music theory won't help you.
Gender studies probably won't help you either.
Studies, it's like why would you invest something that, like I see people go to school in liberal arts and they get a sociology degree and a socialist makes maybe 25, 30,000 and you're paying 100,000 for it's not going to pay. Look, there's a few things, engineering, CPA. There's a few degrees that will actually pay and you'll get your return on investment.
That's right.
But
That's
but they, of course, the banks and the have sold people this idea on, we'll lend you the money, you can get a degree, you'll be successful.
no,
Well,
you're absolutely right. And
buyer beware.
buyer beware. Jacob, they say it's a First Amendment issue. Harvard says it's a First Amendment issue. They should let them just handle it within their own campus as a private institution. But you've seen the federal government intervene in other universities.
Yep.
Well, when there's been conservative speakers and pro-life speakers and anti-abortion and pro-life speakers and pro-traditional marriage speakers on campuses, they've been closed down by the universities with their rights of free speech and First Amendment completely suspended. So they're being hypocrites and liars as usual. If free speech was to be there, it should be there for everyone.
That's right.
There's only free speech if we agree with it.
Yeah.
It's just the usual hypocrisy.
You also have state schools, Jacob, like Michigan, University of Michigan, UCLA, especially Michigan. Big problems, big pro-Palestinian student body, huge amount of university students that are coming from the Middle East. And now they're going after not only the Jewish students, but seemingly they're going even after the boards of regents, who are actually, some of them are in support of the Jewish student and protecting them. They vandalize their homes, they vandalize the school. Even the Attorney General, Dana Nessa, who is Jewish, is being accused of working with the Trump Zionist administration. This is an ongoing thing now in universities. The worst of the worst are in these schools.
First of all, any of these students who are not American citizens should have their student visas canceled or their green cards canceled.
That's a big issue, isn't it, with Marco Rubio standing on it, but they're going after him, saying that he has no right to do so. He is the Secretary of State.
Yep.
Look, courts are not staying in their lane. What you have here is judicial fascism. The courts have no right to make policy. That's not their function constitutionally. Any judge who attempts to make policy, who usurps the power of the executive branch or of Congress, should be impeached. Judicial activism should be an impeachable offense.
No, I agree. David Lester, you think anything could be done against this? Because it just seems like they're stalling. They keep stalling, and they just want to stall for 4 years so they can get Trump to be ineffective. Maybe he is going to run 2028. I'm not saying he is, but there's something hats now with that. But are they just trying to prolong this so he doesn't get anything done?
this is the play. This is the only thing that seems to be working at this point, because when he first came in, he was hitting them left, right, up, down, left, and center. So they've got this, that they've got all these judges that they put in. They all seem to be having connections to either uh, their family is involved in the refugee movement, the payments from USAID, and all these other scams that they've got going on. The judge may not have it, but the wife, the kids, they all have getting their pockets lined. So these judges are just issuing rulings, and yes, the object is to have actually a new trial for every one of the 20 million refugees, so that
Man.
they never go back, so that our country is destroyed. And most of these ideologies are Marxist, and they're coming from the far left. This is Marxist ideology, and it's not Americanism. And they just couldn't. They hate. They love evil and hate good.
Yeah, and you can see how they treat the Jewish students, Jewish believers, of course. Jacob, in Parkway Crown Heights in Brooklyn, you had the security minister, the Israeli security minister Itmar Ben-Gvir, visiting the Lubavitch synagogue. A riot broke out, pro-Palestinians, anti-Jewish, pro-terrorist organizations outside marching, going after Jews, a big melee. Even Elise Stefanik from New York, who's probably going to be, hopefully, the ambassador to the UN, stepped in and said, "This is heinous. We need investigation." They're calling for an investigation because this is the third time this synagogue has been attacked.
You know, the first investigation should be the Bush dynasty and his administration. After September 11th, it was Bush and Cheney. They did not crack down on Islamic immigration. They continued the express visa program. So the seminal source of so much of this problem that you see on campuses and what's taking place in Borough Park in Brooklyn, this goes back to the policies of the Saudi owned and operated Bush administration. I blame Bush personally, the Rhino Bush family. When Donald Trump tried to put restrictions on Islamic immigration until we can verify if they were radical or not, people began saying, the left-wing press, he's trying to perpetrate a Muslim ban. We had
Yeah, that was Schumer.
We had Barack Obama not allowing federal investigative authorities to go on the internet to harvest information
Yeah,
about visa applicants, and they were the ones who were where you are.
yeah, not too far from here.
California, they killed 14 people. They killed 14 people, courtesy of the Obama administration. Should there be an investigation? Yes. Should there be criminal sentences? Yes. The first ones should be indicted and criminally prosecuted are Bush, Obama, Clinton, any American administration who allowed these people in after September 11th without proper screening and safeguards.
Agreed. Agreed. David, I'm going to go to you real quick. While Israel's trying to get Hamas out of Gaza, at this point, they're still going after them. They recently just had a raid on some terrorists, about 50 of them they got rid of. You got countries like England, like France, like Germany, uh, saying that this is morally twisted, that they're denying aid to the Gazans. So they're taking this side. This is called the E3 movement, foreign countries who are basically saying that Israel is committing a very twisted, wrong thing by denying the aid of Gazans. He says, which looks like a humanitarian crisis. Israel responds and says, well, this aid is not going to the people. They're going to building up terrorists. Now, everybody's quoting the Geneva Convention in terms of how to fix this. But your thoughts on that? You know, there's a big movement in Europe, as we've seen it, against Israel, against the Jewish people. Now it's gaining other momentum by having countries align themselves and purposely go after Israel.
Well, the the Hamas runs a great PR organization. They know how to lie. They know how to lie effectively. They they have what they do is the terrorists grab the food. They're all first in line. They take all the, cream and everything right off the top. And then they take a little bit of rice and things and they put just three little pots out and they get 200, 300 people there and they start filming them and say, oh, look, they're all starving and everything. They're all begging for food. It's all PR. This is what they do. Every the soldiers have all got it. They've stole billions of dollars in aid to build a war machine to kill.
That's
And
right.
now that this machine has failed to protect even the Hamas soldiers, because most of them have died. A lot of them have died, but there's still some that are holding out the fight. All you want peace, lay down your weapons. You want to eat, lay down your weapons. But see, they don't love the people. They don't love them. They're nothing but pawns in their war against Israel. I mean, I've seen films where Israel called everybody in the building and said that because of the weapons stored there, we're going to drop the building. The people started, they were given an hour to get out, and Hamas comes running up with weapons and said, you have to stay in the building. You stay there, you die
That is
there. You know,
insane. Insane.
how could you do this? But they have no look. This is a people that train their children to, as soon as they can speak, to hate and to want to kill Jews. This can't be denied. You see it on the internet. You see videos. They're proud of this. But, I always struggled when I was a young Christian to think about babies dying, when God would say, kill them all. But now I understand as a mature Christian that if a baby dies before the age of accountability, these kids that they're training to kill and to be filled with hate, at least they'll go to heaven. You know what I mean? At least they'll have some peace because they have no hope in life if they stay in a place like Gaza with Hamas leaders that are sold out to the devil and sold out to a God of death. They love death. And so that there's going to be no peace for them.
Aid should only be given
Yeah.
via NGOs directly to the people, not to
Yeah.
Hamas. But not 1 volt of electricity, not 1 pill of medical aid,
Yeah.
not 1 ounce of food, and not 1 drop of water should be allowed into Gaza until the hostages are released.
Yeah. And they're not
Don't blame
breaking
Israel, blame Hamas for not letting the hostages go. The food can come in tomorrow, today, if you let the hostages go.
they're not breaking the law by not giving the enemy soldiers comfort and aid. That would be treason, you
Yeah.
know.
I'm going
So
to read, David, to you the
okay.
straight out of the what they call the Geneva Court Convention, because everybody keeps quoting on, oh, Israel's doing this and they're violating the Geneva Convention. This is Article 23. It says a side, which would be any side of the war, it's not obligated to allow in aid if it's likely to assist a military or economic effort of the enemy. That
Right.
is the Geneva Convention.
You notice how they work just like the devil. They only tell part of the problem. They were trained by him to just
Yeah.
just put the part that's advantageous, but don't read the whole thing.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you read the whole thing, you see, oh, we're not violating
We're
it.
not violating it. And this is such a sham. I guess with Christians even believing the media and Israel's this, Israel's that, and even believers who will take the side of Hamas. Jacob, we talked about Starmer and we talked about Macron and we talked about Germany and their stance against Israel. I want to talk about a country that had somebody like that, Trudeau, and somebody who has similar views to Trudeau, Corbyn. And but there's an election coming up next week, and this is Canada and the election. Who will win, and what's the ramification to Canada if if let's say Corbyn wins again?
No matter who wins, the long-term unification of Canada cannot be guaranteed. If the Labour Party wins, if Carney was a horrible man, it would be horrible for Canada. He was horrible in the Bank of England, and he's horrible for America, and horrible for Israel. If he wins, it will push independent sentiments in the Western provinces, particularly Alberta. Let's remember, it was by less than 1% of the popular vote that Quebec did not secede from Canada. They do not have a confederation in their constitution. It is not a confederal constitution like the United States that fought a civil war to preserve the Union over the issue of slavery. They don't have that. It's like the United Kingdom. It's a British Commonwealth country. It's like the UK. They can have a referendum like Scotland did to pull out of the Union or Welsh independence or something like this. These Western provinces, that's true in Manitoba to a degree. It is true in Saskatchewan to a degree. It is even true in Eastern British Columbia to a degree, but it's above all true in Alberta, which is the most oil and petrol rich in terms of mineral wealth. There is a secessionist sentiment. Right now, it is a minority sentiment, but it is growing. People in the Western provinces are getting fed up with two things. One, they're getting fed up with Ottawa, particularly under the Labour Party.
Yeah.
That would not have happened if Mr. Harper had remained prime minister, but without him, it was inevitable. The people are getting fed up. Second thing they're getting fed up with is paying off, bribing, pandering to Quebec to stay within Canada. They're getting fed up with it. Also, there are business interests who I've met years ago. I've met 3 different Canadian very senior oil executives who said they would prefer that the Western provinces be part of the United States because under American law, they would retain control of their own mineral rights. That's quite a situation. I'm not saying that that's the popular view in Canada, but it is a view that will gain momentum if the Labour Party retains power. But even if the Labour Party is voted out of office, the long-term preservation of a united Canada is not a very promising prospect.
Yeah. Let me make a correction. It's Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Carney. And he used to be in the UK, of course. He was part of the UK government at one point. David Lister, I mean, there's Memorial Canada, believers up there. We're on the West Coast, of course. And when I was up there, there's a general sentiment, very much like Jacob, that the closer you get to the border, let's say with Montana, there's a lot of Canadians who think a lot like Americans. They have the same kind of mentality, freedom, this and that and the other, and they would love to do. Do you think this is going to be possible that if the conservative government doesn't win, and if you have another Labor, that you would see this fragmentation, sort of like very much what you see in Europe, that these fragmentation of European countries, but in this case will be one nation, totally divided from conservative to middle of the road to liberals. I don't remember the last time. I think Canada was at the Charter 1982. I think it was when they unified pretty much in a document Canada. Are we going back to pre 1982?
Well, they do have a document that gives them the right to divide, the right to choose.
Yeah.
So, people get fed up. I mean, we've seen a lot of what liberalism was doing to America, and we've had this MAGA movement, as it was.
Mm.
And people have chosen that, look, younger people are now seeing that they don't have the ability to have a decent living in Canada. They can't buy a house. They can't afford. They're taking 70% of their income in taxes. And then when they want to go healthcare, there is no healthcare. It takes months, years to get, MRIs and things like this, or months at least,
Yeah.
to have, and then if you just don't have a compound fracture that's bleeding, you're probably not going to get in right away. It's crazy, some of the stories I've heard that concerning their health care. So yeah, I think young people are really ready to make a move, and if they don't get some relief, they'll make the choice to leave, and
Mm.
probably would be the best decision of their lives.
Wow.
But
Wow.
people are always afraid of what's the unknown. But I think they know Mr. Trump would be glad to help them out. I mean, that would give us, I mean, see, there's something to this even beyond just this, is that we have to protect the northern hemisphere of Alaska and above, and which protects Canada. And now Canada is wanting to cancel their purchase of F-35s, which puts them in even deeper danger of being taken and attacked. So it would be good for those that want their nation to be strong, because they would be joining something strong, and they have, like they said, they could build their nation, their separated nation, pretty strong with the minerals they've got, and they've got plenty of wood up there too.
Incredible resources. Very
Yep.
resourceful.
And any
90%
of
of
these
Canada,
liberals that want to buy some um, what do they call those credits for breathing? For
Carbon credits. Yeah.
Yeah, they got a whole forest up there that they could just sell everybody, multiple rights, billions of dollars flowing in. Let them breathe free.
let's
They
not
want
forget,
to sell, they want to
90%
buy them. Canada can sell
of Canada's population lives
them.
within 100 miles of the United States border.
Yeah.
Yep.
90%. They are technology dependent and they are capital dependent on the
Yep.
United States. Okay, they're both technology dependent and capital dependent on American investment, and they again are also defense dependent
Mm.
on the United States.
Very much so.
These are the realities. Now, when you look at Canada, it's very much like the United States minus Chicago. You've got a liberal stronghold in northern Illinois because of Chicago, um, and its environs. And okay, you've got that. The Rust Belt is now in flux, but Eastern Canada, Ontario, and the maritime provinces are liberal. British Columbia, Vancouver is like San Francisco. You see the garbage, the homeless people on the streets and tents all over the
Yep.
place. Like San Francisco, what had been a very pretty city turned into a garbage tip. What the liberals did in San Francisco, turning a very scenic city, a pretty city, into a public garbage tip. Well, that's what the liberals in Canada did with Vancouver. So you've got a liberal stronghold on the Pacific coast of Canada and in Ontario, in the east of Canada, plus the maritime provinces. Quebec are cessationists. They are their own. Quebec is only there because they're being bribed and paid off to stay in Canada. They're being made. The people in the western provinces where the mineral wealth is are being taxed at a high rate to bribe Quebec to stay part of Canada. How long can this go on?
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Jacob, I want to move to the Middle East because something's really happening with the Abraham Accords. Trump is talking about expanding it. Saudi Arabia, Syria, possibly Iran. Can you believe this? They seek peace with Israel, normalization with Israel. They even had Corey Mills, House of Foreign Affairs, Armed Services Committee in Syria last weekend, talking to the president, which was a former terrorist in Syria. Can this be done? Is the Abraham Accords going to gain traction?
The Abraham Accords is going to be a Trojan horse, whether you like Mr. Trump or not. The Antichrist will bring a false peace to the Middle East. If you bring Iran into this, you cannot trust Iran. Read Daniel chapter 10. Iran cannot be trusted any more than China can. They'll sign anything, but they won't mean it. They'll say one thing and they'll do the diametric opposite. It doesn't matter what they commit to. They'll find ways around verification. They will lie, they will cheat, and they don't see it as wrong to do so because of their jihadist religion. the taqweed, permissible lying. To bring Saudi Arabia into it is questionable enough. To bring Iran into it is absurd. Again, Christians need to be a lot less naive concerning Mr. Trump. Now, I pray for him. I agree with most of his policies. I'd rather have him than the Democrats. There's many good things they say about him and his administration, but I do not always agree with them. And the Abraham Accords are a Trojan horse. Do not put any faith in the Abraham Accords.
David, your thoughts on the Abraham Accord? It's on the table again because Trump's like, look, I want peace. I want this Middle East to be. There's other wars. We'll talk about them in a moment. At least this part, we want to, put it to rest, bring some peace to the Jews, anti-Semitism quelched down. But he's got some nefarious characters in these Abraham Accord.
Well, the first way to bring peace, I think, is to offer Saudi Arabia $100 billion defense package. Oh yeah, that's what Trump just did. So, so they'll have plenty of weapons over there, but those can be countered against their mortal enemies, which is Iran. So they'll never be able to get around with them, along with Iran. Iran, like Jacob said, they're obligated by the teachings of the Hadith that you can make a peace, but you must break it before it's fulfilled. And so they will always operate like this, and they and as because they're true believers in what they believe. They want to see the rest of the world destroyed so that their Mahdi can come back.
Well,
And
don't take my word for it. Take or David's word for it. Here's an ex-Muslim, David. I'll just play this real quick for you.
Violence is 100% intrinsic to Islam. One of the last phrases that Muhammad said is أمرت أن أقاتل الناس حتى أن يقولون لا إله إلا الله, that I have been commanded to fight the world till everyone says there is no God but Allah. The vision of Islam is to take over the world, basically by any means necessary, to the extent that they will lie. And there's this concept called taqiyya, which means like hiding the truth. So this is a concept that you can use in order to forward the Muslim agenda. I've seen it in debates all the time, where I see a Muslim say something in a debate, and I know for a fact he is lying, and he knows he's lying.
It's a lot of ex-Muslims who are speaking out. They're becoming believers by God's grace. God's using ministry to reach out to them. And they'll tell you it's exactly what David, you said, exactly what Jacob said. They will hold no lie unturned until they get their way, meaning that they'll lie to the end.
yeah, with the battle of Kabbalah having restarted again with Sunni against Shiite there, they're going to eventually fight. And I mean, we even see in the book of Revelation, there's going to be the seas come over Iran, and
Absolutely.
the world will probably have to end up fighting there at some point.
Jacob, I'm going to keep moving east. A big story happening right now, Pakistan and India. And I'll set it up for you. 26 people were killed on Tuesday in Kashmir, what they called Little Switzerland. It was part of the British Empire at one point. It was a very peaceful area. That's what they call it Switzerland, because for 35 years, they really had nothing. A Muslim gang, Muslim terrorist groups called the Resistant Front went in there, killed 26 people. They were targeting non-Muslims, Hindus. Asking them to recite Quranic verses. Some versions of it said they were asking them to show whether they were circumcised or not. That hasn't been proven, but that was part of the story. They killed 26 of them, males. They left the women. Go tell Modi what we did. They ran back into Pakistan and now unleashes for now, a diplomatic war. They've broken ties with one another, and there's some more implication because it deals with the economy, with water, with nuclear weapons. Take us through that and the potential danger.
As we've been warning for some time, if a fundamentalist element gets control of Pakistan's nuclear arsenal, look out. Because of the teaching of Islam, that the only assurance of salvation is to be shahadi, to die in a jihad, they're more than willing to push the button. Similarly, in Hinduism, you do have the BJP and you have Modi already. Will they push the button? They believe in reincarnation. If you die for the glory of the defense of Hinduism, you will be reincarnated as a Brahmin. They're reincarnationalists. You do not have the kinds of rational thinking that you had in the West in its conflict with the Soviet Union during the Cuban Missile Crisis, where nobody wanted to push the button, where you couldn't have a crazy man like Nikita Khrushchev pounding his shoe on the podium in the United Nations in New York saying, "We will bury you." The Soviets, Politburo, deposed him almost immediately, where you had Nixon during the Yom Kippur War at the in the heat of the Watergate scandal, trying to save his neck, stoned on tranquilizers and alcohol, and Kissinger and Haig trying to keep him under control. You cannot allow a madman to have his finger on the button when he called the nuclear alert against the Soviets. The Soviets at least thought rationally. The Americans thought rationally. Hinduism, fundamentalist Hinduism, will not necessarily think rationally. They're reincarnationalists, and certainly fundamentalist Islam, jihadist Islam, will not think rationally. They'll push the button. This is very, very dangerous because of the nuclear factor. The nuclear factor alone raises it to an entirely other magnitude of potential apocalyptic catastrophe.
Wow.
Secondly, in addition to that, there is the Cold War, a Cold War between India and Pakistan. India controls much of the badly needed water supply into a almost impossible to regulate growth demographically in Pakistan. These are huge cities like Islamabad and Punjab and Karachi. They are huge, huge cities, highly water reliant. Where's the water coming from? Well, a high percentage of that water originates in the Himalayas. Some of the Himalayas, not a lot, some are in Pakistan. But again, in an area of Pakistan that's very remote. They are dependent on the seepage of the dams inside India. India can bring about a drought and a famine systematically in Pakistan and literally starve Pakistan into a position it can't get itself out of, which will again only seem to be something that can be resolved with a military solution. It is very, very dangerous. There's the nuclear factor, but is there also the water factor? And this is not going to change. The hatred between Hindus and Muslims inside India itself. Don't forget, after Indonesia, India is the most populous Muslim country. There are more Muslims in India than there are people in Russia, far more.
Wow.
There
Wow.
are more Muslims in India than there are Arab Muslims in the Middle East, considerably more. So there's the internal threat that India faces, and then there is the Cold War with Pakistan that is not really as cold as it once was. There have been other instances when Pakistani terrorists came from Pakistan into India. They blew up the Raj Hotel across the street from the Gate of India, a place I've been. They blew up hospitals. They've attacked trains of Hindu tourists going to Hindu holy cities. It's ongoing. It's ongoing. It's a Cold War that is not always cold.
No.
This is the worst the crisis has been for some time. There have been no fewer than 6 wars already, 6 border wars in the Punjab, Kashmir region between India and Pakistan.
David Lister, the effect of this is so they canceled 2 treaties. They've actually broken up diplomatic relationships at this point. There is, of course, what Jacob was talking about, which is the water treaty. It's called the Indus Water Treaty but they also broke the other treaty, which is the Simla Agreement, which basically is like a Cold War agreement, and the other one is the water agreement. Now, the escalation is so quick at this moment. You got the father of a Navy officer in India whose son was attacked and was killed in that attack. So you have some really close to military personnel that have lost family in this. So this is fast. I've never seen it build up this fast. In 2008, you had the Mumbai bombing, but it was tame for a while. Then it blew up again and things like that. But this is probably the fastest I ever seen it build up.
Yes, just come across the wire, as they say. Pakistani minister has said if India wants all out war, we will give them all out war.
Man,
So that's from the Pakistani's prime minister.
yeah, from
So
Islamabad. Oh man,
this is at the top, and so hopefully cooler heads because they both have nuclear weapons
yeah.
and they both can deliver them.
Yeah,
So
Modi says that you need to get out of Pakistan immediately. Every Indian citizens get out of there. They exchanged fire at the crossing, at the border crossing. I think Jacob's he's been there close by enough. I'm not sure exactly how close it was, but
I've
uh,
been to that crossing. I've actually been
yeah.
to that crossing.
Oh, you have? Okay. So it is going fast. It is going fast, and it's not the only one, but this is probably one of the most problematic because of the connection with India and our State Department and Tulsi Gabbard. Jacob, where do you think the U.S. will try to broker a peace deal because of the relationship with Modi?
The relationship with Modi is window dressed a lot. It's not necessarily all that friendly. India has engaged in practices with the United States that are not really American friendly in terms of trade. That's to begin with.
Mm.
However, India does try to play China and the United States against each other. That is their game. Looking after their national interests, Modi is trying to play China and the United States against each other. They don't like China, and therefore they will move towards the Americans. But they will still use their relations economically with China, despite the conflict and hatred, in order to pressure the Americans. India plays both sides. India is under Modi. India is not a country that can be trusted, but he is a Hindu nationalist, and he will look out for the self-interest of his country. And he realizes that the long-term good of India is more found with the West, with the traditional relationship with Britain because of the empire and with the United States. He realizes he's better off with the Americans than with the Chinese, but he's more than happy to play both sides. Pakistan is the opposite. The Belt and Road Initiative, China has a massive project to build a railroad and a highway connecting China with the Indian Ocean via Pakistan in order to circumvent the potential for an American blockade on the Straits of Malacca. So China has deeper interests with Pakistan.
Interesting. Very
well,
interesting.
with India, they're with the trade problems with China wanting to have all these friends and everything and bring them in to isolate America. India is now wanting to make deals with America by getting more into our marketplace. And also, since China says we don't want them deal with Boeing no more, India has offered to take those 737s, and others have offered to take them too. So everybody's kind of coming our way,
Yes.
right now. So, but I mean, look, you don't trust India, they tell you yes and it means no and no means yes. So, yeah, you do have to watch out. But when you've got somebody threatening nuclear weapons at you, you do want to have more friends.
No, you're absolutely right. Jacob, I'm going to still go east. Another incident in the Ukraine, Russia, in this one, it seems to be accelerating. A Russian general, Yaroslav Moskalik, was killed today in a car bomb. This is again another attack on Russian generals or lieutenants or doctors or chemical engineers. This is, of course, following what happened last time with the daughter of Alexander Dugin, Daria, who was also killed in a car bombing, as it was meant for him, but she was in the car. Peacekeepers entering Ukraine. Russia says you can't have them. This is the peacekeepers from the UK, France, and in Germany. You can't have them. That this is an act of war. They bombed Kiev couple of days ago, or was it yesterday? It's all kind of blending in together. So it's a hot situation now. Trump's trying to make peace with Zelensky, with Putin. They got Witkoff today in Moscow trying to get a peace deal. Rubio and JD Vance are ready to walk out on Zelensky, says they can't deal with them. And if they don't want the deal, they're walking away. Take us through that and what are the options here because it's getting hot.
There's a general frustration within the Trump administration that both sides seem to be belligerent in their disposition. I do not like Mr. Zelensky. That is very true. At the same time, long before any of this, even before Putin entered the Ukraine for the first time, when he went to Crimea, when he saw the weakness and the lack of resolve of Barack Obama in Syria, and he knew Obama was weak, and he made the move into Crimea. Even before that, I warned that he was a neo-Stalinist, that he wants to salvage as much as he can of the former Soviet Empire, and that he is driven by a resentment of having lost the Cold War. That has always been my position concerning him, and it's my position concerning him now. I personally am not happy with any concession made territorially to Putin concerning anything. But I would make the concession that, look, we don't want the Ukraine in NATO. We're willing to keep it out. We know it's got a history of government corruption that we've seen with Biden and his son, certainly, and Hillary Clinton. It's a corrupt country. We don't want it in NATO. We will guarantee that we will keep it out. That is the inducement. That is the incentive for Russia to negotiate. That is the card that should be played. We will keep them out of NATO. All Ukrainian troops will withdraw from Russian territory. It's only a small amount. And the Russians will withdraw from the Ukraine. And then we will lift all sanctions. You can rebuild your economy. Your oligarchs can have free reign again and put their yachts in Florida, or they have townhouses in London, or whatever they want again. There'll be an unfreezing of all Russian funds in order to upgrade the badly damaged Russian economy. The ruble can begin to gain ground again. You can revitalize the Russian economy, and we will allow that to happen with goodwill. It's in your economic interest to end this thing, and we will keep them out of NATO in your strategic interests. That is the card that needs to be played. But Russia needs to be told, look, here's the other side of the coin. If you don't do that, we're going to allow the frozen funds to be used by the Ukrainians to purchase upgraded NATO, including American weapons. You're going to have a lot higher casualty rate in Russia. It's going to be a desperate situation. Your economy is going to be pushed to the point of irrecoverability if you don't make peace. Instead of this money being used to reinvest in the Russian economy, it is going to be used to purchase weapons to kill Russians. We don't want that. We're giving you a way out. Additionally, we are making a deal with the Ukraine over rare earth metals. We don't trust China anymore. Ukraine is the next best source. Certainly, it's the best source in Europe. We will use rare future payment of weapons to be purchased in not cash or currency, but in rare earth metals. The British did this with the Saudi Arabians, allowing a 20 billion pound arms deal to be purchased with oil. So too, we're going to allow to be paid in oil. We're going to allow the Ukrainians to buy weapons paid in rare earth metals. Now, we don't want this. This doesn't have to happen this way. It doesn't have to happen this way. We're offering you a way out. I am against Mr. Trump making any territorial concessions to Putin. It didn't begin with the Ukraine. It began in Georgia. You
Yep.
cannot trust Putin. He's a bad man. I'm not saying Zelensky is a good one. I'm just saying that Putin is a bad one and he cannot be trusted. Others, however, including other conservatives, would disagree.
Yep.
David, listen, what are your thoughts? Is there a way out of this?
Well, for Russia, not only is it their economy hurting, which under Trump, it was growing when they had the peace deal, they were growing at 7% a year, and their birth rate started back up. But right now, their birth rate has plummeted with this war. And then with the loss of all these men in war, it's ruining their economy even more because this is going to destroy their their population, and they're not going to be able to remake it. And so, so they went from 7% growth to 0.07% growth. So their economy's in the toilet, their population's in the toilet, their money is in our banks frozen, and so they're in a bit of trouble. And he needs to find a way out because there's even talk on websites, out there that the military's thinking of removing him. So this could be a bad thing. That wouldn't be a bad thing to get rid of him, put somebody in with that wants to build their country again.
Yeah, but you think that, I mean, obviously Jacob talked about the concessions and some of the deals, and obviously he's not in agreement with it regarding Crimea. I know there's large population of Russians there and they voted for it and all that back in 2014, 2015. Do you think, I mean, that's 10, 11 years to reverse that back to Ukraine as a deal maker. Obviously, that's where Zelensky's balking and said, no, we can't do that. The I want to point this out very quickly. The Time Magazine run an interview with Trump and dealing with it. He's not only dealing with Middle East. Apparently now we can add the India-Pakistan issue. Now is Russia, Ukraine. At what point it just becomes so overwhelming that you have to have all these peace deals in order to keep it from being destroyed, the world being destroyed. Where are we heading?
There'll be fear and anxiety among the nations, none of them knowing the way out. This kind of pandemonium that we see was biblically predicted, but it is only a prelude to the kind of confusion that'll get worse. Ultimately, I have no doubt that with this pandemonium and confusion, even though there may be interim periods of respite, that ultimately it'll set the stage for people in their desperation to accept the Antichrist who will offer a solution. That is the ultimate. I'm quite convinced that is ultimately how it will turn out. And it will not just, of course, be Europe, it'll be the Middle East particularly. And it will be global on a broader scale. Ultimately, it'll be that way. There's a crisis within Europe now because of the alienation of the United States. Does Europe really want to foot the full bill for its own defense and face an aggressive Mr. Putin in the Ukraine out of their own pocket without the United States? And with that, the American military presence, there'll also be other problems, not just economic. The Americans will have to sell you the technology. This is going to be something that will make the iron try to stick to the clay even more. If there's an American withdrawal from NATO, which is not unfathomable,
Right.
the iron will seek in desperation to stick to the clay. And I can only see from Daniel chapter 2 that this opens the way for Antichrist.
Jacob, speaking of, we're winding down to the end of the episode here, so please start sending your questions in, if not already done so, to Davey on Rumble, and we will take them at the other end of the episode on Backstage with the questions. So please do so if you haven't done so already regarding, obviously, the topics. There's plenty of topics to discuss, biblical questions. Jacob, I want to discuss the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab. He's out. Allegations are burying him in terms of his resignation. He resigned just this week, took himself down from being like the chairman of the board to like just being a board member back in May of 2024. Now he's resigned completely. Same day the Pope died, he was gone. And now we have allegations that he was using funds, World Economic Forum funds for the
Yeah.
organization to luxurious hotels, massages, all kinds of weird, we used to call them the devils from Davos, all kinds of weird stuff. Why massages anyway? But that's another story. And he's out. Another guy's in. Where's the future of the World Economic Forum? Are they going to play a major role, or you think they're just a dead organization that has been more than will be?
There will be efforts to reinvent it. There'll be efforts to reinvent it. The Davos is not so much declining as it is changing form. I'm not that concerned about Schwab. I'm more concerned with who's going to replace him. But what really captivates me about Davos the most, of the World Economic Forum, is the spiritual power on back of it. And to understand the spiritual power on back of it, we must understand the philosophical power on back of it. The zeitgeist, the spirit of the age that is demonically controlled, that's driving it. I would point to the El Hariri, the Israeli
Oh yeah.
professor who was an advisor to Schwab. Look at Hariri. That is the ideology on back of the World Economic Forum. That is going to dictate the form it will ultimately take more than anything else. Don't look at Schwab. Take note of whoever replaces him, but don't make him the focus. Look at Hariri. If anyone has not seen the latest video from Hariri, they ought to watch it. It is pure Antichrist. Pure Antichrist. I take it you've seen it, Marco, yes?
If it's the last one, it depends which one it was, because he comes out with some bizarre ones sometimes. But was it talking about the obviously the not the well, obviously he's a globalist, he is a transhumanist,
The
he is
destruction of Christianity, and the invention of a new religion.
okay. I probably haven't seen that one. No, I probably haven't seen that one.
It is very troubling.
Hmm. And I mean, he still maintains his position as a very, very
Yes.
influential counsel within the World Economic Forum.
Yes.
The new guy, Jacob Peter Brapek, which is former Nestle CEO, he's talking about water. He's talking about controlling water. Is this troubling, especially with the water wars going on in the world now?
These water wars, it's not just what you see happening now in Pakistan and India. It is something you see in Africa with the Nile and with the construction of these three huge dams in Ethiopia. Going to generate a lot of electricity, going to help the economy of Ethiopia, but it will create potential crisis, mega crisis for Egypt and for Sudan. Watch the water wars that can develop in Ethiopia. Watch that more than you watch even the ones in India or Pakistan, because it will affect the Middle East. There are miniature versions of water wars. What is interesting is the water wars that were taking place in Israel with the Litani River in southern Lebanon and the Jordan have largely been resolved because of the Israelis developing, with the help of the Americans, cheaper desalination, cheaper technologies for desalination. You've got 7 major desalination plants in Israel, and there's probably 1 or 2 more that are planned. Israel is no longer purely dependent on the Sea of Galilee anymore. They have developed desalination technology that's always been there, but they've improved it to the point of making it more economically viable. They've brought it into the realm of affordability. It's interesting, when the rest of the world is heading towards water crisis, Israel's is actually getting better.
Yeah, I've seen them when I was there. I've seen desalination plants off the Mediterranean. It's incredible what you see there. And I wish
Yes.
they would have done it here in California, but anyway, that's another water problem that we've had here. Jacob, to finish off the episode, I wanted to ask you, and I think many people are wondering from your perspective, any replacement for Francis, for Mario Bergoglio, who's passed away now as a pope? Many prophecy bloggers, many people that are in a lot of ways sensationalists are pointing to the next guy, the next pope is going to be the Antichrist, no doubt. There were people like your friend, former friend Dave Hunt, who went to be with the Lord, who was convinced that the Catholic Church was the mystery Babylon of Revelation 17 and 18. His book, of course, The Woman Who Rides the Beast, was a very good book. I highly recommend it. But there are some people that believe that the next one is going to be the false prophet. Do you have that take that the false prophet will come from the Roman Church, Roman
I
Catholic
think
Church?
it's entirely possible. And I've always believed, and I've stated in my book, Shadows of the Beast, that the final pope figure or pope figure can be the false prophet of the book of Revelation. I've
Very
always
good.
postulated that as a possibility and even as a strong possibility, but I've never been dogmatic about it. Nonetheless, there is no question Roman Catholicism will be central to the Antichrist system, and the papacy will be pivotal, play a pivotal role in that. There's no question that will be the case. How it manifests and plays out, I don't exactly know, but I do know that the Antichrist agenda very much depends on how Satan is using and is going to use and has always used the Roman Catholic Church. But it goes beyond that. It's going to be the World Council of Churches. It's going to be the interfaith dialogue, the general eclecticism. But yes, the Catholic Church will be central to it. The idea of the Pontificus Maximus, the bridge builders between faiths, no question, no question whatsoever. There will be a battle between the traditionalists. I'm reluctant to call them conservatives. Let's if someone was a theological conservative, they wouldn't be a Roman Catholic. But let's call them traditionalists. Between the traditionalist Roman Catholics and the progressivist Roman Catholics, of which Francis was one, that will be the struggle. The movie Conclave was trying to
Yeah.
champion the popular movie, the homosexual agenda within Roman Catholicism to get a quote unquote homosexual or gay pope. This is the conflict that's going to be. The most conservative seems to be a Black African. He
Yeah,
seems,
from Ghana, right? He's from
yeah,
Ghana, I believe. Yeah.
yes, the Cardinal from Ghana seems to be the most conservative, and I use the term conservative in the Catholic sense, meaning traditional, somebody who's not woke, who is not progressive with the homosexual LGBTQ agenda. He's one. His Black race may help him in an age of woke, ironically, except that he's anti-woke. So there's only 135 cardinals now who are going to be able to vote because the others are over the age of 80. So it's going to be down to 135
No,
people.
the interesting thing is, Jacob, a lot of these guys were placed by Bergoglio. They were placed
Yes,
by,
correct,
so
correct.
they're like him. So it will be interesting to find out. We'll know more about it when
A lot of the
obviously.
younger ones are going to be people who were appointed by him.
Yep.
Hence, the progressivists are going to have a very strong hand and a strong position.
Right. Yep. I want to finish with Christianity Today, Jacob. But once, I guess it was good at one time. I don't remember when it was started, but it was started by the Billy Graham organization at one time, and it's gone through different phases I guess the guy from YWAM was involved in it at one point, from the Assemblies of God. Now it's Russell Moore, the chief editor, and to publish things like he was a friend of evangelicals,
Yeah.
other evangelical Christians. I don't even call them evangelical Christians necessarily, but they have come out in support. And Francis was a great guy and stuff like that. Part of the deception, would you
Of course
agree,
it
is
Of
is to
course it
see
is.
the
When
gospel coalition
you have
involved in it.
people, you have now look, that magazine is a piece of garbage. I haven't read it in over 30 years. I don't think people should subscribe to it. I think people should unsubscribe to it. I hate the thing. It's not what it was founded to be. Um, be that as it may, when you've got these people like Al Mohler, who compromised. J.D. Greer, who's a wicked man. Tim Keller, who's gone. I'm not glad he's dead, but I'm certainly glad he's gone. John Piper, um, and Russell Moore.
Yes.
When this is the mainstream evangelical leadership, not even counting the word faith televangelists and hypercharismatics, I'm just talking about those who are seen as more mainstream. When those are your leaders, your leader is not Christ.
Hmm.
When you got leaders like Russell Moore and Al Mohler now, and J.D. Greer, when you've got people like that, if those are your leaders, your leader is not Jesus Christ. There may be individual churches that are not sold out to the agenda, but that is the leadership of mainstream evangelicism in the Western world. It's not salt and light anymore, and it's not likely that it's going to be. There'll have to be something new or something different, but it will not be part of that. How can any born again believer say that a pope who put a blessing on same-sex marriage and told priests to bless same-sex marriages and excommunicated other priests, other hierarchy, other cardinals who disagreed with them, who opposed them? How you can say someone like that is a friend of born again Christians makes me question: are you a friend of born again Christians? Or are you even a born again Christian? What kind of born again Christian would pay any homage or give any recognition to a villain?
Yeah, there it is right there. A U.S. evangelical considers Pope Francis. And this is his writing by Russell Moore, editor-in-chief of Christianity Today.
Russell Moore is not only a disgusting specimen of Christian leadership, he's a disgusting specimen of a human being. Tell him I said that.
Very woke, very left. He's gone. Obviously, the Gospel Coalition has gone into this DEI stuff, woke stuff, intersectionality stuff. It's very sad. The Gospel Coalition, Russell Moore, many of these people that thought even in the reform circles that they would try to bring some kind of mainstream evangelical thinking and writing and preachers has turned into, I guess, their idea that if you're woke, you're actually doing the Christian faith. Many of them have said we knew what the gospel was, but now we know what the gospel really is when we got into social justice. Can you believe it? It's social justice they believe is the gospel now.
Look, when you have Alistair Begg as a leader, a pastor, compromising on same-sex marriage, when you have someone like that and you recognize him as a Christian leader, your leader is not Christ. When you have people like Andy Stanley and Stephen Furtick, your leader is not Jesus Christ. When you have someone like Russell Moore or J.D. Greer, or people who even go along with it, like Al Mohler, if those are your leaders, your leader is not Jesus Christ.
Very well. Very well said. Jacob, thank you so much for catching up. We got another section. We got the questions coming in, and that is on Backstage. So we will be leaving here and going on Rumble. And Backstage will take on the questions and send them in now. We appreciate it. Thank you for being with us, catching up with Jacob. We will sign off from YouTube. We'll go to Rumble strictly there. God bless you guys. We'll see you in just a couple of minutes.